So thank you everyone for joining us for the Community of Practice number 2 for the 24-25 school year. This is Connecting English Language Development and Tennessee Academic Standards, and this is the first part of a two-part series. This Community of Practice session is designed to equip you, educators who provide support to English learners, with how to use ELD standards beside the Tennessee academic standards to support engagement and interaction in English in the content classroom. This series is designed with ESL specialists, as well as classroom teachers, instructional coaches, school administrators, and district leaders in mind. English learners are supported by the Tennessee Department of Ed through the Office of Academics, Division of Special Education and Student Supports. This division is led by Dr. Jennifer Jordan, Assistant Commissioner, and the student support team is headed by our own Joanne Runyon, Senior Director of Student Supports. My name is Raven Cleveland, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of English Learners for the Tennessee Department of Ed. And this Community of Practice session is offered as part of our English Learner Ongoing Plan. Our English Learner Plan is one part of the overall strategic plan for the department. This Community of Practice and these Community of Practice sessions are for the instructional development for all levels of educators working with English learners. If you have questions or concerns regarding ESL rule, policies, ILPs, scheduling, assessment, or other inquiries, we're going to provide contact information at the end of this session so that you can receive additional support or learn about other opportunities to learn. So Tennessee Department of Ed is a guiding agency, so keep that in mind as we provide the support to provide communities of practice like this. We'll start with a topic of concern, and then we'll discuss ways in which the challenge can be mitigated. Please hold from taking any one slide out of context until the conclusion of the presentation in which we've had the opportunity to explore this topic. Our goal is to discuss the best practices, guidelines, and strategies that organize, manage, and steward the resources from which you, the educator, can draw. Our goal is to provide support for educators so that English learners in Tennessee reach English language proficiency. For ESL educators, we know that providing intensive language instruction based on research-backed best practices, student language acquisition and proficiency is accelerated. So we're going to seek to enable English learners to cultivate their linguistic competencies essential for achieving academic proficiency across all subject areas through solid ESL and content instruction. We also provide support for general content teachers, and we want to highlight the importance of delivering rigorous content instruction that is accessible and meaningful to English learners. We know that by integrating language development strategies and scaffolds into content classrooms, we ensure that English learners have equitable access to standards-based, grade-level academic content. We seek to foster the deep understanding and engagement among English learners in all subject areas. Although this community of practice is comprehensible without last month's session, we seek to build knowledge for the ESL educator through this series of Community as a Practice. In the previous session, we discussed the Tennessee K-12 Knowledge Building Instructional Practice Guide, or what we call the IPG. The Instructional Practice Guide discusses how core instruction lessons can build knowledge through the use of high-quality instructional materials, lessons that are text-based, lessons that focus on rigorous content, strategic questioning, and deep engagement for students, all aligned to reading, writing, and listening speaking standards. The IPG We hope you have a moment to see last month's presentation. The recording session will be available through TDOE Community of Practice resources. So let's get started talking about how we can connect English language development and Tennessee academic standards, starting with an overview of the Tennessee academic standards. It's important for ESL educators to recognize that it is the academic standards that inform the content of instruction for English learners. They really define what students are learning, whereas the ELD standards really think about how students are using language to demonstrate their learning. Tennessee academic standards provide a common set of expectations about, again, what students will be learning. It is the way to establish, measure, and improve instruction in the classroom. Tennessee academic standards are determinations of what students should know and be able to do across subject and grade levels. Sometimes called the content standards, they can cover skills such as adding or subtracting, or content like understanding the roles of the three branches of government. The use of standards is important. It assumes that all students, including English learners, are capable of meeting high expectations. It's important for ESL educators to recognize that it is the academic standards that inform the content of instruction for English learners. Again, it defines the what students are learning, whereas ELD standards really think about how students are using language to demonstrate their learning of that content. Standards are not a curriculum, and although they should be deeply connected, they don't outline the day-to-day lessons and activities teachers use. Rather, they can provide an end goal for instruction. Curricula provides a medium to achieve those expectations. So let's take a moment now to ground ourselves in some second language acquisition understandings about language learning. BICS and CALP are both acronyms that refer to the English language learner's need to develop conversationally and the grade appropriate proficiency in English necessary to be successful in the classroom. BICS, or basic interpersonal communication skill, are those language skills that people need in social situations. This, sometimes called playground language, is what we use on a day-to-day basis to interact with others. BICS is essential for students to interact with you and their peers while they follow instruction, listen to directions, or interact with their peers. You hear this language while students are playing at recess or during team sports activities, in the classroom, at lunchtime, or socializing outside of school. This type of language skill is not necessarily cognitively demanding, and it usually develops between 6 months and 2 years. The social language helps students access CALP. A common misconception is that students who are proficient in BICS, or the social language, is also proficient in academic language. CALP, or Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, refers to the student's formal academic language. CALP is that language that is essential to academics, such as listening, reading, speaking, and how to write about the relevant subject matter. Landing this language skill is a crucial concept when it comes to a student's academic success. It does take time and patience for students to become proficient in a language and those language skills necessary for academic learning. CALP usually takes between 5 and 7 years for a student to acquire the appropriate level skills for their academics. If a student has no prior experience in school, has interrupted formal education, has special education needs, or lacks parental support, this process could take even longer, maybe even up to 10 years. While BICS can come naturally, CALP, since it's much less contextual and or socially embedded, requires explicit instruction. Jim Cummins tells us that we should be mindful that a student's apparent ability to interact at a high cognitive level with BICS, or street language, does not necessarily imply the same cognitive or communicational ability in the classroom. He insists that a more thorough assessment of a student's academic language abilities be performed before moving the student out of a sheltered or heavily scaffolded language development environment. Therefore, CALP is what educators of all students, especially English learners, should focus on while helping students access content. Let's look at the Tennessee English Language Development Standards and what we know about BICS and CALP. Adopted in August of 2024, the new Tennessee English Language Development Standards help English learners determine the need of what they face academically. All learners, but especially English learners, face learning effective academic uses of a language, CALP, while simultaneously learning the academic content and skills with and through that language. This can be especially challenging for students learning a new language. To fully and successfully participate in schools, English learners must simultaneously acquire English language proficiency and achieve academically across content areas. ELD standards act as a starting point for identifying the language that English learners must develop to successfully access and negotiate content in and beyond the classroom. These ELP standards do not stand alone, but provide the bridge from those content area Tennessee academic standards expected of all students. The new standards provide a framework for English learners to acquire the content knowledge and English proficiency needed for meaningful learning and communication. These standards correspond to Tennessee state standards with a focus on college and career readiness. They reflect a shift in focus from language possession to language use within the content areas. This means gone are the days where instruction is rote vocabulary or grammar drills. Instead, it focuses on language functions necessary to deeply engage in the content with our English-speaking peers. The 10 ELD standards are organized in relation to participation in content area practices, and standards 1 through 7 build on language functions necessary in the content classroom. The standards are not content specific, but they explicitly recognize that language acquisition takes place across content areas. It also fosters collaboration among educators and benefits English learners' learning experiences. At present, second language development is largely seen as the responsibility of the ESL or ELD teacher, while content development as that of the subject area teacher. Given the new standards' explicitness and how language must be used to enact disciplinary knowledge and skills, such as a strict division of labor, is no longer viable. Content area teachers must understand and leverage the language and literacy practices found in science, mathematics, history, social studies, and the language arts to enhance students' engagement with rich content and fuel their academic performance. This is where English learners spend most of their day anyway. ESL and ELD teachers must help cultivate a deeper knowledge of the disciplinary language that English learners need and help their students to grow in using it. Collaboration and sharing of expertise are needed among ESL ELD teachers and their content area teachers at all levels. Additionally, alignment and integration are needed across ESL, ELD, and subject matter, learning objectives, curriculums, lesson plans that teachers prepare and deliver. The first 7 standards highlight a strategic set of language functions or what students do with language to accomplish content-specific tasks. The last 2 of these 7s are specific language functions that speak to the collective forms of vocabulary, grammar, and discourse specific to a particular content area or discipline. These are skills that are needed by English learners as they develop competence in the practices associated with English. Standard 8 addresses the word phrase dimension, looking at social and academic vocabulary usage and the specificity of word and phrase choice. Examples might include general, specific, and technical language, multiple meanings of words and phrases, nuances and shades of meanings, and collocations and idioms. Standard 9 addresses the discourse dimension. You might know this as linguistic complexity. It examines the quantity and variety of grade appropriate speech in text. This might look like the amount, structure, or density of speech or written text, coherence and cohesion of ideas, or a variety of sentence types to form organized text. And finally, Standard 10 addresses the sentence dimension, also known as language forms or language structure. This is the types and variety of grammatical constructions, mechanics of a sentence, fluency of expression, or writing style. These should look familiar as these microlinguistic features were also used under WIDA standards. Just to restate, the 10 new ELD standards are designed for collaborative use by ESL ELD and content area teachers in both English language development and content area instruction. We want to highlight and amplify the critical language skills necessary to be successful in the classroom and in life. For educators, coaches, and administrators, the standards also align to the IPG we mentioned during the last session that helps us drive our instruction. The ELD standards can be examined through 3 modalities, or how language is used. The different modalities represent the different ways language is used to communicate and understand information. Each modality supports various cognitive and linguistic processes and contributes to a more comprehensive development of language skills. While standards 1 and 8 primarily focus on receptive language skills, standards 3, 4, and 7 focus primarily on protective language skills, and standards 2, 5, and 6 focus on interactive language skills. So when thinking about text-based rigorous content, tasks and questions, and student engagement in the classroom, the educator's instruction, or tying language modalities, that listening, speaking, reading, and writing, to the instructional practice guide, can help you ensure that instruction in the multilingual learner classroom is comprehensive and aligned with best practices. The IPG focuses on core elements of effective teaching, the planning, instruction, and assessment, making it a useful framework for incorporating language modalities. So let's talk about how we can use the Tennessee academic standards in conjunction with the Tennessee ELD standards. How can educators blend Tennessee academic standards and ELD standard? Well, let's start by asking these questions. Asking the question, what is the language needed in service of learning to the content standard, is essential for supporting multilingual learners or English learners in Tennessee. It helps students access and master academic content. It also emphasizes the need for intentional focus on academic language development, which includes subject-specific vocabulary, syntax, and discourse practices. This approach bridges the gap between content knowledge and language proficiency, ensuring that language is not a barrier to understanding or expressing content mastery. By identifying the language demands of a content standard, teachers can differentiate and scaffold instruction to meet the diverse needs of English learners at varying proficiency levels in their classroom. This promotes equity and access by allowing all students to engage meaningfully with grade level material. Teachers can provide scaffolds such as sentence starters, visuals, and modeling to help students practice language while learning content. This question also encourages intentional teaching of language forms, vocabulary and structures, and language functions. Again, how students use the language to express their learning. It creates opportunities for academic conversations in the classroom, allowing students to develop deeper content understanding through structured discussion and collaboration. Asking this question again ensures that instruction is equitable. When teachers plan both content and language development, they provide English learners with scaffolds to access the same standards as their native English-speaking peers. This help avoids the common pitfall of watering down the content and instead focuses on teaching the academic language needed to engage with the material fully. It promotes high expectations for all students. Ultimately, this practice fosters a more inclusive learning environment where students build both their language skills and their content knowledge, ensuring that they are equipped to succeed in the academic setting. Once you've asked question 2, next ask, what modality or modalities will students engage in during the lesson? Each modality supports various cognitive and linguistic processes that contributes to a more comprehensive development of language skills. Here's why they're important. It promotes holistic language development. Engaging students in all modalities ensures that they become proficient in both receptive, productive, and interactive skills. This balance helps learners use language in diverse and meaningful ways. It also promotes cognitive development. Each modality activates different cognitive processes. For example, listening and reading engages comprehension skills, while speaking and writing require active production of language. Using multiple modalities promotes deeper cognitive engagement. It also helps with real-world communication. In real-life communication, people often need to switch between different language modalities fluidly. For instance, listening to someone speak, responding, and perhaps taking notes or writing down ideas. Students need practice in all modalities to handle these real-world situations effectively. It also supports multimodal learning. People learn in various ways, and some might grasp concepts better through reading, while others through speaking or writing. Fostering all modalities accommodates different learning styles and strengths, making language learning more accessible and inclusive. It also and finally promotes and enhances critical thinking. Writing, for example, allows learners to process and organize their thoughts more deliberately, while speaking helps with spontaneous thinking and communication. Exposure to various modalities encourages critical thinking and problem solving through language. So ask yourself, what modality or modalities will students engage in during the lesson? Finally, let's think about what students should know and be able to do at the end of the lesson, not just with content, but also with language. ELPA21.org has 2 great resources that can help educators determine student can-dos. Achievement level descriptors, also known as reporting performance descriptors in the ILP, describes what students should know and be able to do in language by domain based on their language assessment scores. On the other hand, the proficiency level descriptors can help educators plan instruction and measure student progress towards reaching the appropriate proficiency for each level of acquisition. So asking yourself, what should students know and be able to do at the end of the lesson can be assisted using these 2 resources. Asking this question and using these resources ensures that instruction is purposeful, targeted, and aligned with clear language and content goals. By starting with the end in mind, backward design helps teachers focus on the desired outcomes, what students know and should be able to do with the language, and plan instruction that directly supports those outcomes. The backward design approach emphasizes creating assessments based on these end goals before planning instruction. This alignment between instruction and assessment ensures that students are being taught the language skills based on the ELD standards they need to succeed, minimizing the gap between what is taught and what is tested. Additionally, backward design supports scaffolding. This is crucial for language learning, as students often have varying proficiency levels. It allows teachers to plan lessons with appropriate scaffolds and anticipate challenges tailored to individual needs, helping all students work towards the same language objective. So let's put it all together now. Let's look at these 2 Tennessee 5th grade ELA standards. These are Tennessee academic standards. Take a moment to ask the question, What is the language needed in service of learning the content standard? Hint, look for the verbs of the standard. They usually identify the language function. Then ask what other academic content words students might need as you unpack this standard. Did you say report on a topic or present an opinion? For the second standard, did you decide write opinion pieces? Now, let's look at what modality students will engage in. We know that students will be reporting and writing. Those are the verbs we identified from the standard. So I'm going to look at the productive modality. We know students will be speaking and writing. I'm going to look at the productive modality standards 3, 4, and 7 to see which could address what I want students to know or be able to do at the end of the lesson. The productive modality identifies that the learner is a speaker and or a writer. It is a planned or formalized output such as speech or written document. The communication is set for a specific audience, has purpose, like presenting an opinion, and generally abides by rules or genre of style. We know that we can choose standard 3, 4, or 7, and it might be most aligned to what we want students to be able to know or do. In looking at the productive modality, I see that ELD standard 4 addresses what I'm seeking language-wise for my students. ELD standard 4 says an English learner can construct grade appropriate oral and written claims and support them with reasoning or evidence. Then I can look and see what my students can do using the ALD, also known as the reporting PLD, found in the ILP. So I know that students at level 1 will be able to express an opinion about a familiar topic, while students at level 3 will be able to construct a claim about familiar topics, introduce the topic, provide a few reasons or facts to support the claim. And students at level 5, or students on proficiency with their English speaking peers, can construct a claim about a variety of topics, introduce the topic, provide logically ordered reasons or facts to support the claim, and provide a concluding statement. Based on a student's test scores and their goals set in their ILP, the ALDs can indicate, again, what they can do at their current proficiency level, helping teachers plan for assessment based on these standards. In part 2 of this series, we're going to take a look at how to plan those rigorous tasks, text, and questions that meet the depth of the content and language standards that we just talked about, while also asking students to do the cognitive lift while engaging the lesson with their peers. I really hope you can join us next month. If you've seen this presentation or you have more questions about ESL programming, compliance, or assessment for English learners in Tennessee, please feel free to contact us. Again, my name is Raven Cleveland. I'm the Senior Coordinator of English Learners. As always, we'd like to hear from you, so please let us know that you've participated. This QR code will take you to a very short attendance and survey form. Thank you for attending this Community of Practice session, Connecting English Language Development and Tennessee State Standards, Part 1.